The dispatch call came through on my personal radio while I was fixing fence posts on the back 40 of our family ranch. All units, we have a report of child endangerment and trespassing at the old Morrison Ranch on Canyon Ridge Road. Complainant states there's an unsupervised minor on dangerous private property. I stopped mid-swing with my hammer and listened more carefully. The old Morrison Ranch? That was MY Ranch. And the only minor who should be anywhere near my property was my own 8-year-old daughter, Emma, who was supposed to be playing in our backyard while I worked. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Martinez. Can you repeat that location? Canyon Ridge Road, mile marker 7. Complainant identified herself as Linda Garrison, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. She's requesting immediate police response to remove an endangered child from private property. My blood pressure spiked. Linda Garrison was calling the police about MY daughter on MY property? I dropped my tools and jogged toward the house, keying my radio as I moved. Dispatch, I'm responding to that call personally. 85 minutes. Copy, Sheriff. Units 12 and 15 are also en route. I found Emma exactly where she should be, in our backyard, building what appeared to be an elaborate fairy house out of sticks and stones near our old oak tree. She looked up as I approached, her face lighting up with the kind of smile that made every day of being a single dad worth it. Daddy, come see what I'm building. It looks amazing, sweetheart. But I need to ask you something. Have you left our yard today? No, sir. I've been right here working on Fairy Village. She gestured proudly at her construction project, which involved several small structures arranged around the base of the oak tree. Has anyone come into our yard? Anyone you don't know? Emma's face scrunched up in thought. There was a lady with a golf cart. She yelled at me from the fence. What did she yell about? She said I wasn't supposed to be here. I told her this is my house, but she said I was lying and she was going to call the police. Emma looked worried. Did I do something wrong, Daddy? No, baby. You did nothing wrong. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. That's when we heard the distinctive whine of an electric golf cart approaching our front gate, followed closely by the sound of police sirens. I walked around to the front of the house with Emma beside me, just in time to see 2 patrol cars pulling up behind a pristine white golf cart. The woman climbing out of the golf cart looked like Central Casting's idea of a suburban HOA president. Perfectly styled silver hair, designer casual wear that had never seen actual work, and the kind of self-righteous expression that suggested she was about to save the world from something terrible. Deputies Jackson and Murphy climbed out of their patrol cars, both young officers who joined the department in the past 2 years. They looked confused as they approached the scene, probably wondering why they'd been called to what appeared to be a normal house on a normal day. Officers. Linda Garrison called out dramatically, pointing at Emma like she was identifying a fugitive. There she is. The child I told you about. She's been unsupervised on this dangerous property for hours. Deputy Jackson looked at Emma, then at me, then back at Emma. Ma'am, are you saying this child is unsupervised? Completely unsupervised. I've been monitoring the situation for over an hour, and there's been no adult supervision whatsoever. That's when Deputy Murphy noticed me standing there in my work clothes and Sheriff's Department baseball cap. Sheriff Martinez? He said, clearly confused. What are you doing here? I live here, Murphy. This is my house and that's my daughter. The silence that followed was beautiful. I watched Linda Garrison's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then something approaching horror as the implications began to sink in. Your daughter? Linda stammered. Yes, ma'am. Emma, come say hello to Deputies Jackson and Murphy. Emma waved shyly at the officers, who both waved back with the kind of awkward friendliness cops reserve for children in weird situations. But she's been unsupervised. Linda protested weakly. Ma'am, I said calmly, how exactly is a child unsupervised when her father is working 50 yards away on the same property? I didn't see any adult supervision. Did you look for any adult supervision? Or did you just assume? Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Deputy Jackson stepped forward with the careful diplomacy of someone who just realized he was in the middle of something way above his pay grade. Sheriff, Mrs. Garrison called dispatch reporting an abandoned child on private property. She said the child appeared to be in danger. What kind of danger? I asked, genuinely curious. Linda found her voice again. The property is clearly abandoned. The house looks like it hasn't been maintained in years. There are rusty farm implements scattered around. It's a death trap for children. I looked around at my family's ranch, the house my grandfather built in 1952, the barn my father restored in the 1980s, The well-maintained fences and carefully organized equipment storage areas that represented 4 generations of hard work. Mrs. Garrison, what exactly makes you think this property is abandoned? Look at it. The house needs painting. The barn is old. There's farm equipment everywhere. No one has lived here in years. Ma'am, I've lived here my entire life except for my 4 years in the Marines and 2 years at the police academy. That's impossible. This property has been empty for months. Based on what? Based on the fact that it looks empty. Deputy Murphy was trying very hard not to smile. Ma'am, not looking like a suburban neighborhood doesn't mean a property is abandoned. But there's no HOA oversight. No community standards. No architectural guidelines. Ma'am, I said patiently, this is a working ranch outside the city limits. There's no HOA because there's no homeowners association. There should be. Properties like this affect everyone's home values. Whose home values? The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. Linda pointed toward the valley below, where I could see the red tile roofs and perfectly manicured lawns of Willowbrook Estates gleaming in the afternoon sun. Our community. This eyesore is visible from our development. It's bringing down our property values. And there it was. Linda Garrison hadn't called the police because she was concerned about child safety. She'd called because my ranch didn't meet her suburban aesthetic standards, and she'd convinced herself that gave her the right to interfere with my family. Mrs. Garrison, I said, let me make sure I understand your complaint. You called 911 to report child endangerment because my daughter was playing in her own backyard, on property you think should look more suburban. I called because there was an unsupervised child on dangerous abandoned property. But now that you know the property isn't abandoned and the child wasn't unsupervised, what exactly is your complaint? Linda stared at me like I'd just asked her to solve advanced calculus. The property is still dangerous. There are rusty tools. And that barn looks unstable. Ma'am, Deputy Jackson said, do you have any specific evidence of safety violations? Look around. Everything's old and rusty. I gestured toward my equipment storage area, where my tractors and implements were neatly organized under a protective shed. Mrs. Garrison, could you point out something specific that's dangerous? She marched over to my equipment shed with the confidence of someone who'd found her smoking gun. These rusty farm tools. They're death traps. Deputy Murphy followed her and examined the implements she was pointing at. Ma'am, these are well-maintained farm tools. They're not rusty, they're just used. They're dirty. Farm equipment gets dirty when you use it to farm. And that tractor. It's ancient. I looked at my 2019 John Deere tractor with its fresh paint and gleaming chrome. Ma'am, that tractor is 4 years old. It looks old. It looks like a tractor. Linda was getting desperate now, pointing at various aspects of my ranch like she was conducting a safety inspection. The fence posts are wooden. They could have splinters. And that barn, those boards are weathered. Mrs. Garrison, I said, have you ever been on a working ranch before? Of course not. Why would I want to? Then maybe you're not qualified to judge what constitutes safe farming practices. Emma had been watching this entire exchange with the fascination of a child watching adults behave incomprehensibly. Finally, she tugged on my sleeve. Daddy, why is the lady mad at our house? She's not mad at our house, sweetheart. She just doesn't understand what a ranch looks like. Linda turned her attention to Emma with the kind of condescending tone adults use when they think they're being helpful. Little girl, do you understand that this place is dangerous? You could get hurt playing here. Emma looked around at the property where she'd been playing safely every day of her life, then back at Linda. Ma'am, I know where all the safe places are. Daddy taught me. And Grandpa taught Daddy when he was little. But what if you fell and got hurt? There's no one watching you. Daddy's always watching me. And if I got hurt, I'd call for him and he'd come running. Just like always. The simple confidence in Emma's voice seemed to deflate Linda's outrage. Here was a child who clearly felt safe and loved, playing in a place she knew better than most adults knew their own homes. Deputy Jackson cleared his throat. Sheriff, is there anything else we need to address here? Actually, yes. Mrs. Garrison, I'd like to understand something. How long have you been monitoring my daughter? I've been keeping an eye on the situation for over an hour. From where? Linda pointed toward the ridge line above my ranch. From the hiking trail. Mrs. Garrison, that's not a hiking trail. That's private property. It's a public access trail for Willowbrook Estates residents. According to who? According to our community development plan. I looked at Deputies Jackson and Murphy. Gentlemen, could you check the county records? I believe Mrs. Garrison may have been trespassing on my property while conducting her surveillance of my daughter. Deputy Murphy pulled out his tablet and spent a few minutes checking property boundaries. Sheriff, according to GPS, that ridge line is definitely part of your property. There's no public easement or trail access marked. Linda's face went pale. But we've been using that trail for years. It's part of our community amenities. Mrs. Garrison, using someone else's property without permission is called trespassing, regardless of how long you've been doing it. But our real estate agent said we had access to mountain hiking trails. Ma'am, you might want to clarify with your real estate agent exactly which trails you have access to. The irony was perfect. Linda Garrison had called the police to report trespassing while she was actively trespassing on my property to spy on my child. Mrs. Garrison, I said, I'm going to give you a choice. You can apologize to my daughter for frightening her with threats about police removing her from her own home, and we'll call this a misunderstanding. Or I can file charges for trespassing, filing a false police report, and harassment. Linda looked around at the deputies, at Emma, at me, and finally at the ranch that had apparently offended her suburban sensibilities so deeply that she'd convinced herself she was saving a child from danger. I was trying to help, she said finally. Mrs. Garrison, calling 911 because you don't like how someone else's property looks isn't helping. It's harassment. I thought the child was in danger. You thought a child playing in her own backyard 50 yards from her father was in danger because our house doesn't look like yours. Emma stepped forward with the kind of directness that 8-year-olds excel at. Ma'am, I'm not in danger. This is my home. I love it here. Linda looked down at Emma, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her expression softened slightly. I'm sorry I scared you, little girl. I thought you were lost. I'm not lost. I live here. I can see that now. As Linda climbed back into her golf cart, she paused for one final comment. Sheriff Martinez, I still think this property could use some improvements. For safety reasons. Mrs. Garrison, I'll consider your input. Right after you explained to your HOA board why their president called in a false emergency that tied up county resources. The look on her face suggested that conversation wasn't going to go well for her. After the patrol cars and golf cart had disappeared down the mountain road, Emma and I sat on our front porch watching the sunset paint the valley below in shades of gold and purple. Daddy, Emma said, why did that lady think our house was scary? Some people think different is scary, sweetheart. They're used to places where all the houses look the same, so a ranch like ours seems strange to them. But our house isn't strange. It's perfect. I think so too, Emma. Your great-grandfather built this house with his own hands. Your grandfather raised your daddy here. And now you're growing up here too. That makes it pretty special. Will the lady come back? I don't think so, baby. I think she learned something today about the difference between what she thinks is dangerous and what actually is dangerous. Emma was quiet for a moment, then brightened up with the resilience that made children amazing. Daddy, can we finish building Fairy Village before it gets dark? Absolutely. The fairies are probably wondering where their new houses are. As we worked together in the gathering dusk, adding the finishing touches to Emma's elaborate fairy construction project, I reflected on one of the stranger calls I'd responded to in 15 years of law enforcement. Linda Garrison had seen a child playing happily in her own backyard and somehow convinced herself she was witnessing child endangerment. She trespassed on my property to conduct surveillance, then called 911 to report an emergency that existed only in her imagination. But the most amazing part was that she'd done it all because my ranch didn't meet her suburban aesthetic standards. In Linda's world, anything that didn't look like Willowbrook Estates was inherently dangerous and probably illegal. The dispatch radio crackled to life as we put the final stick in place on Emma's Fairy Palace. Sheriff Martinez, we have a noise complaint at Willowbrook Estates. Complainant reports loud music and possible underage drinking. I looked at Emma, who was admiring her completed construction project with the satisfaction of an architect reviewing a successful building. Dispatch, send units 12 and 15. I'm off duty. Copy, Sheriff. Enjoy your evening. Sometimes being the sheriff meant dealing with real emergencies. Sometimes it meant dealing with Linda Garrison's imagination. But the best times were when it meant sitting on your own front porch with your daughter, watching her create magic out of sticks and stones while the mountains turned purple in the evening light. Daddy, Emma said as we packed up her fairy construction supplies, I think the fairies are going to love their new village. I think you're right, sweetheart. And I think they're lucky to live on such a safe, beautiful ranch. Even if the lady thinks it's scary? Especially because the lady thinks it's scary. That means it's too special for people who don't understand magic. Emma grinned and took my hand as we walked toward the house her great-grandfather built, on the ranch her family had called home for 4 generations, where she was growing up safe and loved despite Linda Garrison's suburban sensibilities. Some emergencies are real. Some are imaginary. And some are just the result of one person thinking their aesthetic preferences should be everyone else's safety standards. But the best part of being both a sheriff and a father was knowing the difference, and teaching your daughter that home is the place where you belong, regardless of what the neighbors think it should look like.